Welcome, believers. Welcome, conspiracy theorists. Welcome, Facebook friends, TikTok followers, and YouTubers. If you can, and I know it's a big ask, please follow me on YouTube. Hit the like button and subscribe. That would really help me get my UFO stories out there. And they need to be told, don't they? Right, so basically, we are talking about the UK incident, as you can see. And last month, sorry, I'm getting a bit tired out here, right? Last month, we talked about Elsie Oakenson, right there. Okay, and she was abducted by aliens, apparently. Right, so, because we're talking about the UK, and we started on the 70s, but we could talk about any decade, really. I'd like to talk about a bloke called Anthony Dodd. He's really well known out there. He's a big, well, bless him, he was a UFO enthusiast, okay? And like I always say, let me just sort that out quick, right? Like I always say, I'll get my information from a place called UFO Insight. That thing there, okay? All right, it's really, really good. I really like it. Check it out if you can. So then, right, a cold night in January 1978. The story of Anthony Dodd. Okay, and it starts there, right? So Tony Dodd is quite rightly still viewed as one of the leading UFO investigators in the UK, even after his death in 2009, bless him, right? Not only was his influence crucial in the organisation of independent UFO research in the United Kingdom, and like I say, at the moment, I'm massively into the United Kingdom, his influence was global. With the international reach of the investigations, Dodd was not a lifelong UFO enthusiast at all, right? At the time of his first sighting in 1978, he was a North Yorkshire police sergeant, and a highly respected one at that, okay? So he was a copper, right? And coppers are great UFO witnesses. As I always say, don't you? You know, I mean, they are trained to spot stuff, right? Dodd, sorry, I think it's pronounced Dodd, would continue to see this mysterious crafts, however. During his last decade of service with the police in 1988, he would retire from the force and actively investigate UFO sightings full-time. He would not only become an expert in such encounters, but also of alien abductions. You know, that scary conspiracy that evolves around them, you know, I mean, abductions, are they for, I don't know what you call it, DNA splicing, all right? But he started getting involved in all of it. Now, incidentally, these sightings would result in Dodd capturing a photograph of the object. He would send it for analysis at the Ground Saucer Watch in Arizona, the GSW, right? The GSW are largely viewed as genuine and incredible people, perhaps in part due to their having the nerve to take on the CIA in a court of law over freedom of information, all right? So if they're not serious about UFOs, you wouldn't mess with the CIA, would you, all right? Their actions exposed many cover-ups that could no longer be seen as just conspiracies, right? Dodd's photograph was not only confirmed to be genuine, with a nil chance of it being a hoax, it also has the distinction of being the first confirmed photograph of a UFO from the United Kingdom. All right. And, you know, I really did struggle to find it as well. I really tried to find this photograph, but I believe I have, and I will put it there. OK. All right. So that's the drawing he made of it, and that's the photograph. OK. So then, now the story starts at around 2:30 a.m. and he was driving around the lonely roads of Skipton as part of the supervising of the night patrols. Now, as he would most nights, right, he had with him a beat patrol officer who he had picked up a short while back. I would imagine as much for company for himself as to give the beat officer some time off his feet to, 2:30 a.m. in a lonely North Yorkshire road, right? Now, this particular night, a call came over the police radio. Now, regarding a frantic housewife whose husband had not returned home. Now, his first instincts told him that by the time they arrive at the property, the husband would be at home, or for the worse, because of having one too many. No, and get a tongue lashing from his angry wife. That was his gut feeling about it. Even so, they were duty bound to investigate the report. He would turn the vehicle onto a quiet country road that was a shortcut to their destination. A quiet country road. Now, don't that sound like the beginning of The Invaders with David Vincent? He got lost on a quiet country road, and look what he staggered upon. Do you remember The Invaders? I did like it. It was a 1960s programme, so a lot of you viewers have probably never even heard of it, but check it out on YouTube. The beginning is great, right? Now, these roads were narrow and at points had sharp curves in them. Now, if you've ever been down a lonely country road in England, we know what they're talking about, don't we, right? And this forced Dodd to keep his speed at a minimum. At one of the curves, both men noticed a glow of light, around the corner. Now, as there were no buildings along this road, the policeman expected to see an oncoming vehicle. As they turned the curve, each was confronted with a massive disc with a dome shape on the top. It also had small round dark portholes along the side, as well as a skirting at the bottom, and I believe that is the photo of it, all right? Now, as the vehicle came to an abrupt stop, each man could now see clearly the underside of the disc. Dodd would write that their three half spheres protruding from underneath in a triangle were visible. Dodd and the young beat officer opened their car doors and stood looking up, just looking at the fascinating craft. It moved at around 20 miles per hour towards some woodlands in the distance. Now, from their vantage point, it seemed to descend, and now only a glowing ball of light was visible. Eventually, that too disappeared. After a moment of quiet contemplation, both men returned to their seats inside the car. Right, so let's have a recap, okay? So you've got two officers driving down a lonely country road, and that's Yorkshire. That's up there, that is, right? And it's North Yorkshire, where the malls are, okay? So they're driving along, right? They get a call about a missing husband. He's probably been down the pub. He's probably in a bush somewhere, drunk, right? So his gut feeling is that there's nothing to worry about. They've got to investigate it anyway. So they go to investigate it, go down a quiet country lane, and they see a massive UFO on the curve of the road. All right, got portholes. It's got two spheres at the bottom in a triangular shape. Right, now that would really freak you out, wouldn't it? Right, so I would stand there for hours simply thinking, what have I just saw? Right, but it gets weird because someone else has seen it, right? So after a quick discussion about the object and what it might have been, Dodd started the engine and they drove forward. Dodd, now in two minds about continuing to his original destination or pursuing the strange craft, if, of course, he could locate it, right? Now, after several minutes, lights again came up in the distance, but this time it was the headlights of another patrol car. So not only have we got two police witnesses, we've got another two. As each police vehicle met, they stopped alongside each other. They're winding down their windows, and the bloke in the new car said, "Did you see it? Did you see that?" Came the excited voices of the driver of the other police car. Now, Dodd informed them that they had seen it. The three police officers exchanged notes and ideas before going on with their duties. Now, Dodd would continue to investigate the missing husband, who, as he suspected, was no longer missing, but certainly not in his wife's good books, and we've all been there, haven't we, right? He then returned to the station and made contact with Leeds, Bradford, and Manchester airports. So Leeds, Bradford's radar was shut down for the night. That's convenient, isn't it? And Manchester had no record of any crafts. So whatever that was didn't get picked up by the radar, right? Or is Leeds, Bradford's radar being shut down just a coincidence, right? Now, Dodd would continue his shift, finishing at 6 a.m, but not able to put the sightings out of his mind. I mean, because you wouldn't, would you? Right? I mean, it would proper freak you out. So we have got basically, he says 3 witnesses. So the other car must have only had 1 policeman in it, right? But we've still got 3 variable good witnesses to what they saw. Now, Dodd would have many other sightings over the last decade while he was working with the police force. And he would often bring people with him at their request who were eager to see these strange appearances for themselves. Now, although Dodd didn't actively speak about his work, most close to him knew of his interest as well as his sightings. Okay, one time, for example, his son-in-law, his name was Anthony Grant, would accompany him to the Yorkshire Moors. And like I say, the Yorkshire Moors are right out there. They're up there. All right, the Yorkshire Moors. They would negotiate the quiet country lanes and eventually arriving at a hill which Dodd directed the vehicle towards. Now, as they reached the top, a large cigar-shaped object filled their view. It was hovering silently and was lit up with a line of windows. Now, Dodd would state it was as if the craft was waiting for us. The two men stared in awe at the huge craft for several moments. Then a bright light emerged and it began to ascend, eventually disappearing from sight. So, you know, was that vehicle waiting for them? All right, but I'll continue the story because it makes more sense then. And by the way, right, these are the same moors that the lads in the American Werewolf in London got lost on. It's cool, isn't it? Right? The Slaughtered Lamb pub. I'm sure it's around there somewhere, right? Now, on another occasion, this time with two colleagues, he was parked on the moor, as I say, the moors, the same moors, the American Werewolf in London, right? They had been there for around 3 or 4 hours, and it began to look as though nothing of consequence would take place. Dodd would step outside of the car to stretch his legs before planning on driving home for the night. And as he did so, he immediately noticed a huge craft hovering silently directly overhead. It was brightly lit in many colours. Now, he says, like the fairy lights on a Christmas tree, so you can imagine, can't you, right? Now, Dodd would state later his two guests also vacated the vehicle and all three men stood watching the otherworldly craft for several moments. It then shot directly upwards at a lightning place and was gone. So, I was going to have a drink, right? So, three people on the moors, the Yorkshire Moors, right, on the moors, saw another craft, right? So this Tony Dodd, he seems to be seeing them all over the place, doesn't he? So then, we will carry on, right? So, now, one bitterly cold morning in late 1978, at a little after 4:30am, Dodd would experience another sighting. Now, this was on his usual patrols with a beat officer in the passenger seat. So he did have witnesses. The police car was hampered by the fact that it had been snowing relatively heavy for several hours. And because of this, they were forced to drive really, really slowly. All right, to negotiate the narrow twisting roads, right? Because we are not that great when it comes to getting rid of snow in Britain, right? Your major trunk roads, what we call the motorways and the A roads, oh yeah, they do get looked after, but the back roads, they don't. Right? And we all know how dodgy it is, right? So suddenly, as they arrived at the top of the many hills in the area, they both noticed a bright light in a farmer's field below them. Now, realising even the most ardent farmer wouldn't be out at this time of the morning in the current weather, Dodd brought the car to a stop and watched the light. Now, almost as soon as he did, the mysterious craft began to move. Now, he said it remained low to the ground, skimming along the surface with the grace of a champion ice skater. That's what he says. Now, as usual, there was no sound audible. Both men watched the object as it made its way over the fields, eventually disappearing into the distance. Dodd would continue to drive out to the moors. I think it's like what he liked to do. And not just when his police car was with him. It was quite the norm for him to spend several hours, 5 or 4 times a week, sat there watching the skies. And do you know what? I think I'd do the same. I mean, the light pollution must be, well, the non-light pollution must be great in the moors. You know, you must be able to see some beautiful stars. I mean, from where I'm from, you barely see anything, right? Now, Dodd began to realise, okay, with perhaps not coincidence, perhaps whatever the intelligence was behind these cosmic crafts, they were subconsciously calling him to the malls. Now, because he's always there. With this in mind, he decided he should attempt to make contact. So, quick recap, because I messed that up a little bit, right? So, it was quite the norm for him to spend several hours, 4 or 5 times a week, sat watching the skies from the otherwise lonely spot in the north of England. Perhaps more importantly, he usually did see stuff. Now, I always say, right, if you look, you will see stuff. You will. You look up, you will see stuff. All right, because I do, right? Now, as I said, Dodd began to realise, with perhaps not a coincidence, that he keeps seeing stuff. So he tried to make contact, right? He said, well, look, I keep seeing all this sort of stuff. I'm going to try and make contact. And that's what he did, right? So Dodd would take to keeping a powerful torch in the glove box of his car at all times. And that is quite sensible if you're in that area, right? Whenever he was on the moors and would see one, whenever he was on the moors and he would see one of the mysterious crafts, he would stop his car and flash his torch at the object in attempt to create some form of basic communication and acknowledgement. That was his idea, right? Keep a torch in his car, and if he sees something, pull over and do some communicating, right? So one December morning in 1982, somewhere in the early hours before dawn, that acknowledgement did come, right? He did get the opportunity to signal a UFO, right? That morning, Dodd and his 2 friends, also with an interest for UFOs, were sitting in Dodd's parked car on top of the moors. Each clasped a flask of coffee in an attempt to ward off the cold, as you would, right? Now, braving the cold, Dodd opened the car door and stepped out to walk around for a moment or two, stretch his legs. He then let out an audible gasp, which brought the other 2 men out of the car, right? And what they saw was a big, large, black triangular object with small coloured lights in the shape of a diamond on its underside. And this was hovering over them, right? So the craft began to move upwards, prompting Dodd to reach inside the car and get his torch. Now, he quickly flicked it on and off several times while pointing it towards the craft. Then, much to his disbelief, the craft performed a sweeping U-turn and come back to where the men stood. It would hover at no less than 50 feet above them. He says it was so close he could see the ripple effect of the material of the windows, and he would liken them to the obscured glass look used in like bathrooms and en suites, So then an amber beam of light on the underside changed from amber to white and back again. Now, this was repeated several times and was a very, what should we call it, obvious acknowledgement to Dodd's torch signal, right? So it's flashing back at him, right? And that's according to what he said. Now, so his wife, we ain't mentioned her yet, right? Now, the sightings Dodd had been experiencing for several years already increased following the encounter in December 1982. This only reinforced the notion that it was not pure chance that Dodd was present when they appeared. So, what he's saying is they're either signalling him or he's signalling them, like telepathically. Again, he wondered whether the decision to keep returning to the moors was his or one that was placed in his mind by a higher intelligence. And, mate, for the amount of sightings that this man is seeing, it's got to be one of the two, isn't it, right? So, on the evening of the 7th of November, 1983, Dodd was with his wife, Pauline. Now, during another encounter, in Dodd's own words, until that evening, she largely viewed his sky watching as a harmless hobby. And I get that, right? Now, but a little before 8 p.m, as they were driving between Bolton Abbey and Andingham, Pauline suddenly exclaimed in surprise, "My God, have you seen that?" right? So Dodd turns his attention to where his wife's gaze was, and he could see a huge craft overhead. Now, he said it was festooned with hundreds of tiny red lights, a bit like the Christmas tree thing we talked about earlier, right? These lights would pulse on and off simultaneously. As the married couple watched the craft, it would swoop down towards them. After passing closely over the top of the car, it's made its way towards the treetops that ran along the side of the road, and it was soon out of sight. Now, Pauline, who would describe the object as similar to a child's spinning top, if you remember those, used to press them, didn't you? They used to spin. Would certainly view her husband's sightings as more significant than a mere hobby now. All right, because she has had a sighting of her own. The craft would soon re-emerge and would head straight towards their still parked car. Now, it wasn't travelling with speed, which gave Dodd ample time to reach for the camera he kept in the car. As it was moving away from their vehicle again, Dodd snapped several shots of this craft, and it would be one of those pictures that the GSW would confirm as being authentic and genuine. All right, and I believe it's that photo, but like I said, I couldn't find a great deal on it. I mean, if you can find it or you know of it, then just let me know. All right, put it on my page or something. All right, if you can. All right. Now, Tony Dodd's influence on the global UFO community remains, and his work is still valid. Perhaps because he did not enter the UFO community with any preconceived notions, or even with an interest in the subject, right? Combined with his investigatory skills as a police sergeant, it makes his work all the more credible and valuable, and I totally agree with that. Like I always say, and I don't want to bore anyone, but policemen are amazing witnesses. You know, like I'm going to repeat myself, right? In the 70s, if you come out and said stuff like that, you were considered a nutter. You had a good chance of even losing your job. Right, so these policemen who come out and say they've seen a UFO, believe them, man. They're telling the truth. So, Dodd, like several other researchers, believed part of his sightings was a choosing of some kind. He would state that all he would have to do was think about a UFO and they would seem to appear. Now, as time went on, and what he believed was subtle telepathic communication, right, every time he thought about them, they seemed to appear. He began to believe that the thoughts were not his, but theirs. It was like they were summoning him. It was more likely that they were putting messages in his head rather than him putting messages in their head, right? Now, while this might sound a little outlandish and crazy, and personally I don't think it does, right? Anyone who has seen a UFO will very likely tell you the importance of luck, right? I mean, I have seen some weird stuff, but like you say, it is luck. It's even, you just got to be looking in the right place at the right time. That's why I keep saying, keep looking up, gang. Just keep looking up. You know, whatever opportunity you get, look up into the sky for a little while. You might just see something. All right. And I do believe that the telepathic stuff is real. I do. So this was the story of Tony Dodd. A fantastic story. A policeman saw loads and loads of stuff, right? And that happened in Yorkshire. The previous one is there, Northampton. Right? That's what we talked about last week. So the map is developing. And I am going to get bigger maps, I think, because I'm going to start running out of space. Right, so I'm going to get bigger maps and I'll have them all over the place. I want to do Scotland, of course I do, and that's not big enough. So I'm going to have to redesign my little UFO hotspot and we'll get bigger maps so we can get a bit more detail. All right, well, look, this was UFOs, aliens and weird stuff. Do love that name. All right. Please like, subscribe and ding that notification bell if you can. And more importantly, if you're still there, right, drop me a message. Chat to me. I love it. You know, and if you can, I have got, I have got it. I haven't quite figured out how to use it yet, right? I've got an email address called UFOs, Aliens and Weird Stuff at outlook.com. All right, if you got any stories, drop me a line. It'll be great. And if you wouldn't mind, I will tell your story. It's got to be UK based at the moment, though. Sadly, it's got to be UK based because that's what I'm fixated on. All right. So this was UFOs, aliens, and weird stuff. I really appreciate you sticking around, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thank you.